Hello everyone. Today we have a little bit of a different video. We're going to be ranking 10 disturbing books. My hope is that this will give you some good recommendations, whether you've never read extreme horror and you're looking to dip your toes in, or if you're a seasoned veteran just looking for your next read. I think we have a pretty good mix of books up for discussion today. Some of these books have enough literary depth to be on the shortlist for the Pulitzer, while others are more geared toward those of you who want a gross book to mess with your friends, or one that will shock you into spitting up your lunch. I do want to point out that this is going to be a very opinionated list, so I might rank a book that you love at the bottom, or a book that you hate at the top. That doesn't mean that either of us is wrong, alright? This is a very subjective topic. I'm going to start with a brief, mostly spoiler-free summary of each book. By mostly spoiler-free, I mean that I'll explain the premise, introduce the main characters, and sometimes summarize a graphic scene so you can understand what the book is like. However, I will not be revealing major plot twists, endings, or second half developments. For example, in a book about two friends being kidnapped, I will of course mention that two friends are being kidnapped. I may even describe some of the ways that these friends are tortured. However, I will not tell you whether or not they survive. Once I've introduced and summarized all 10 books, we're going to move over to a tier list where I will first explain my scoring criteria, and then provide my ranking for each novel. Let's begin. First book we're going to be looking at today is Playground by Aron Beauregard. Playground follows three financially struggling families who are invited to test an elaborate playground built by a wealthy elderly woman named Geraldine Bourdin. Geraldine claims that she wants to build advanced playgrounds for poor communities. Before moving forward with the project, she needs children to test her equipment, and she offers each family thousands of dollars in exchange for participating. Parents all have reasons for needing the money, so they agree. The families are brought to the Bourdin estate, where the children find an enormous outdoor playground filled with swings, monkey bars, tunnels, seesaws, ball pits, and brightly colored obstacles. Most of it appears normal, except for a gigantic green slide that disappears underground. Then Geraldine separates the children from their parents. The adults are restrained in a room filled with monitors and forced to watch as their children are sent through a series of deadly playground games. Geraldine speaks to them through an intercom, while her partner, Adolfo, controls the machinery. Adolfo is an elderly engineer and escaped Nazi scientist who turns Geraldine's ideas to life. The playground turns all these familiar childhood activities into torture devices. There are slides containing hidden blades, monkey bars suspended above pits, and swings, hopscotch courses, and merry-go-rounds are designed to kill anyone who misunderstands the instructions or fails to cooperate. During the first major challenge, two Dobermans force the children into the giant slide. Razor blades are embedded inside the tube, and barbed wire hangs low enough to cut anyone who sits upright. They land injured inside a room covered in marbles while machines fire baseballs across the floor. Each child receives some form of backstory, and their behavior reflects how they were raised. Some have learned that strength means protecting other people, but others have been taught to prioritize themselves and win at any cost. The book is graphic and cruel. It focuses on parental influence, competition, cooperation, poverty, childhood trauma, and adults forcing their own resentment onto their children. It shows quickly how the way that children are raised can dictate their success or lack thereof. The easiest way to understand the premise is to imagine what would happen if Jigsaw designed an amusement park specifically for children. Next we have Cows by Matthew Stokoe. Cows follows Stephen, a 25-year-old man living with his abusive mother in a filthy apartment inside a decaying city. Stephen calls his mother the Hag Beast. He controls what he eats, constantly humiliates him, and enjoys making their home as disgusting as possible. The apartment is filled with spoiled food, insects, bodily waste, dirty dishes, and the smell of rot. Stephen uses television to escape. Sitcoms and advertisements have become his instruction manual for happiness. He wants a clean home, a beautiful wife, a child, and a dog sitting beside the family at dinner. He believes that if he can recreate what he sees on screen, he can finally become normal and find his place in the world. For a while, his only source of affection is his injured dog. But then Stephen gets a job at a slaughterhouse run by a foreman named Cripps. Cripps is this violent and aggressive man who treats killing like a philosophy. He believes violence is how a weak person can become powerful, and he immediately begins testing Stephen's willingness to participate. He repeatedly tells Stephen that Killing frees you to live as you should. During Steven's initiation, Cripps makes him masturbate a cow, then guides him through killing it with a bolt gun and sexually assaults him while he does it. Afterward, Cripps takes him to some other workers who cut holes into another living cow and have sex with those wounds before killing it. Steven is disgusted by Cripps, but also drawn to his confidence. He offers this single explanation for Steven's misery and a clear set of instructions for becoming someone else. Through the course of the novel, Steven also becomes involved with Lucy, a woman in his building who believes emotional suffering accumulates inside the body as a physical black poison. She studies surgical videos and cuts into herself, searching for evidence that this substance exists. Cows is filthy, surreal, grotesque, and difficult to distinguish when it's being sincere versus when it's being satire. At the center of the book, though, is a man who just wants love and safety, but has learned almost everything he knows through cruelty, television, and violence. Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Brite. Exquisite Corpse follows 4 men whose lives gradually come together in New Orleans. Andrew Compton, Jay Byrne, Fran, and Luke Ransom. The novel begins with Andrew Compton, an English serial killer serving a life sentence for murdering 23 boys and young men. Andrew is not remorseful. He spends years studying his own body until he learns how to slow down his breathing and heartbeat enough to fake his death. He remains conscious while prison doctors examine him, seal him inside a body bag, and send him to the morgue. After escaping custody and making his way to America, Andrew eventually arrives in New Orleans, where he meets Jay. Jay is also a serial killer, though he has never been caught. He targets tourists, runaways, and vulnerable young men. He offers them drugs, meals, shelter, or money, then photographs, restrains, and carefully kills them inside his large French Quarter home. In one scene, Jay meets a young runaway at Café du Monde who jokingly asks to be treated like a pet. Jay brings him home, drugs him, restrains him inside a bathtub, and cleans him. He scrubs the man's skin until parts of it come away. Then he pours bleach over the wounds. He photographs each stage of the transformation from a person into something he considers property. Jay is very much like Jeffrey Dahmer. He thinks that photographing, preserving, and ultimately consuming someone can give him ultimate possession and company that lasts forever. That way he can never be alone. One of the men Jay becomes interested in is Tran, a 21-year-old Vietnamese-American drug dealer he encounters outside St. Louis Cathedral. Jay buys a hallucinogen from him and claims to be a photographer searching for models. Tran thinks Jay is a strange customer, but we as readers know that Jay is imagining something much worse for Tran. Tran has friends, family problems, and a complicated history with his former boyfriend, Luke Ransom. Luke is an HIV-positive writer, heroin addict, and pirate radio host who calls himself Lush Rimbad. His broadcasts are angry, poetic monologues about sex, addiction, death, politics, and gay life during the AIDS crisis. The book is graphic, romantic, and so morbid. There's recurring ideas involving hunger, ownership, disease, loneliness, desire, and the point where love becomes indistinguishable from consumption. Fluids by May Leitz. I've already covered Fluids in detail, so if you're interested in a more in-depth summary and analysis of the book, please be sure to check out that video. I will leave a link to it in the description. Fluids follows 2 isolated women who meet during the COVID-19 pandemic and form an intense relationship almost immediately. Lauren is 29 and living alone in the house where her father recently died from COVID. Their relationship was complicated, so her grief is mixed with guilt, resentment, and anger. She spends most of her time using drugs, scrolling through dating apps, watching disturbing videos, and having sex that she does not particularly enjoy. Then she receives a message from Dahlia. Dahlia is a 28-year-old trans woman living with her controlling mother in Oklahoma. She came out shortly before the pandemic shut everything down. The new life she imagined never really began. She's lonely, uncomfortable with her body, and terrified of being seen and rejected. Their first conversations are awkward, funny, and extremely personal. During their first voice call, Dahlia becomes so nervous that she begins communicating by meowing. Lauren meows back. That moment captures why they connect. Both women feel strange and misunderstood, and each is relieved to find someone who does not immediately judge them. Lauren becomes attached almost instantly. She begins describing an entire future with Dahlia before they've even really spoken. Dahlia has to remind her that they've only just met. When they finally meet up together, Dahlia becomes convinced that Lauren is going to kill her, so she tries to strangle her with a pillow. Lauren wakes up, fights back, restrains Dahlia, spits on her, kisses her, and bites her in the collarbone until she breaks the skin and tastes blood. Lauren treats the fight like proof they understand each other, but Dahlia says she does not enjoy being hurt. But Lauren tells her, "I can teach you how to like it." From that point on, the violence in this book escalates to an extreme degree. The book is chaotic, gross, surreal, and emotionally raw. Its recurring themes include grief, dysphoria, queer loneliness, obsession, abusive relationships, self-destruction, and the fear that reviewing your true self will make another person stop loving you. The Slob by Aron Beauregard. The Slob follows Vera Harlow, a pregnant woman working as a door-to-door vacuum salesman while attempting to build a stable life with her husband, Daniel. Vera grew up inside a violent, filthy household. Her older sister, Lisa, struggled with severe mental illness and eventually killed herself inside her bedroom. Afterward, Vera cleaned the room. She scrubbed blood and tissue from the walls and carpet until her hands hurt, but a dark stain remained. As an adult, Vera keeps her home immaculately clean. Cleaning gives her this sense of control, and it allows her to feel separate from the house she escaped. On what is supposed to be her final day selling vacuums, Vera decides to visit one more house. Her baby's going to be born soon, and she could really use the commission. The customer lives alone on an isolated property with barred windows and no nearby neighbors. He's enormous, mostly silent, and covered in grease, sores, old food, and layers of dirt. Vera privately calls him the Slob. The Slob allows her inside and locks the door behind her. Vera begins her normal sales demonstration and asks to see the dirtiest carpet in the house. From there, the Slob leads her upstairs. Inside a bedroom, Vera notices women's clothing and jewelry. She walks around the bed and discovers a dismembered woman spread across a rug. The Slob attacks Vera, takes her purse and keys, gathers the remains, and locks her inside the room. He kicks the vacuum toward her and gives her one instruction: clean it. So she does. And it's just like when she has to clean up after her older sister's death. She vacuums over blood, brain tissue, and pieces of flesh. Once again, someone else has created violence, and she is expected to erase it. The Slob later attacks Vera by hitting her in the stomach repeatedly with a 25-pound dumbbell. He removes tissue from inside her body and forces her to eat it. He inserts the vacuum's metal tube into her vagina and uses the machine to spray hot water and suction out blood and tissue. When he's finished, he orders her to clean the room and the machine. From there, a routine is built. The Slob repeatedly attacks her and creates a mess, then forces her to clean it up. Vera follows his commands while studying his habits and searching for a chance to escape. The book is graphic and extremely disgusting. It touches on trauma, pregnancy, cleanliness, control, domestic labor, bodily autonomy, and the expectation that women repair damage created by violent men. Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. Tender is the Flesh takes place after a virus supposedly makes every animal poisonous to humans. Pets are killed, livestock disappears, and global meat production collapses. Then comes the transition. Governments begin regulating an industry in which human beings are bred, slaughtered, packaged, and sold for consumption. The people raised for meat are called head. Their bodies are described as product, and their flesh is legally marketed as special meat. The story follows Marcus Tejo, the right-hand man at a human processing plant. His job places him in almost every part of the industry. He negotiates with breeding centers, handles complaints about damaged shipments, trains employees, inspects the slaughter floor, and visits a tannery that turns human skin into leather. But Marcos is different from most of the people around him. He doesn't eat meat, and he understands that the language surrounding the industry is really just self-deception. Calling someone product does not change the fact that a human being is hanging from a hook. But he still goes to work every day. He keeps the plant running, corrects employees when they mishandle product, and he's very good at his job. But meanwhile, his personal life is falling apart. His young son has died, his wife, Cecilia, has moved back in with her mother and doesn't speak to him anymore. His father is slowly losing his memory inside of a nursing home. But then, A breeding center owner sends Marcos a live female as a gift for his hard work. She was born and raised in captivity and cannot speak because her vocal cords were removed. Marcos initially wants her taken away, but instead he decides to hide her inside the barn behind his house. He begins feeding her, cleaning her, and spending time with her. Eventually, he names her Jasmine. Marcos recognizes what the world has done to her, but he still owns her, controls where she goes, and decides what kind of life she's allowed to live. Remember, this is a person who has been trained as cattle. She acts like a wild animal, and she can communicate the way that domesticated humans can. But Marcos keeping her at his house is illegal and suspicious, especially given his line of work. So as a connection forms between them, he has to decide what to do with her. One of the novel's most graphic early scenes follows Marcos through the processing plant. Workers stun naked humans, suspend them upside down, cut their throats, drain their blood, remove their skin, and divide their bodies into usable portions. Everyone discusses temperature, contamination, efficiency, and waste. It's like they're moving some other ordinary product, like cereal or oatmeal. The chapters are short, and the violence is described in plain, controlled language. The book is cold, clinical, and uncomfortable. It touches on the use of dehumanizing language, capitalism, grief, institutional violence, hypocrisy, consumption, and how quickly atrocity can become ordinary just because it's legal, profitable, and convenient. Grandpappy by Patrick C. Harrison III. This is another one that I have already done a full video on, so I will leave a link to that in the description as well. Grandpappy follows Charles, a college student who agrees to spend 2 weeks caring for his dying grandfather while his parents go on vacation. Grandpappy is in hospice. He's mostly bedbound, barely speaks, and needs help being rolled so he doesn't develop bed sores. Nurses visit during the day, but Charles is responsible for checking on him, rolling him, and emptying his catheter bag if it becomes too full between visits. But almost as soon as the novel begins, Charles regrets agreeing to take care of his grandfather. The house smells like old urine, spoiled foods, cigarettes, and something else that he can't quite identify. Everything feels decades out of date. The kitchen is filled with expired food, the bathroom is stained and damaged by moisture, and Charles sleeps in his mother's childhood bedroom surrounded by clown dolls. Grandpappy himself looks like a corpse that forgot to die. His skin is cracked, his body has been wasted by cancer, and one claw-like foot hangs from beneath the blankets. Charles does not handle the responsibility of Grandpappy well. He avoids his room, lies to the visiting nurses about how often he checks on him, steals medication and alcohol, and spends most of his free time watching disgusting pornography. Here's one scene where Charles finds Gretel, his Grandpappy's ancient dog, beside the hospice bed, licking Grandpappy's exposed foot. The dog pulls away dead skin and begins biting through one of his thick, yellow toenails. While this happens, Grandpappy is smiling like it feels very good. Charles also discovers old VHS tapes containing pieces of his childhood that he either forgot or never understood. One recording shows Grandpappy urinating all over Charles while the entire family cheers him on. The book is gross, surreal, sexually explicit, and very disconnected from reality. It touches on family trauma, aging, medical body horror, addiction, memory, inherited cruelty, and the fear that returning to your childhood home can make you a part of its history again. 100% Match, again by Patrick C. Harrison III. 100% Match follows Bartholomew Bartley, a 30-year-old fast food worker who has reduced his search for love to a system of percentages. Bart is bald, overweight, socially awkward, and convinced that every part of life can be explained through statistics. He calculates the probability of finding a partner, getting cheated on, being rejected, or being murdered by someone you date. His numbers sound extremely precise, although it's never clear where any of them came from. I imagine most of them are made up. One of the first statistics he gives us is 0.001752% of relationships end in homicide. Bart finds this comforting. He works at Jim's burger joint alongside Hector, a coworker who regularly talks about women, sex, and dating. Bart considers Hector crude and unintelligent, but Hector is significantly better at speaking to people and maintaining ordinary relationships. Bart wants a wife, children, and a respectable career as an elementary school teacher. He believes he deserves these things because he's punctual, clean, polite, careful with money, and more intelligent than the people around him. But Bart is also a serial killer, and the book does not make this a mystery. Bart describes murder, animal abuse, food contamination, and the child chained inside his basement using the same voice he uses to discuss grocery prices and his nightly routine. At the end of an otherwise ordinary day, he casually adds, "Before heading to bed, I shoot the kid I have chained up in the basement." Then he just moves on like nothing happened. Bart also has a list of other weird eccentricities. For example, in one scene, he empties a bag containing 2-day-old feces into a vat of chili at work. He stirs everything together and serves it to customers and coworkers, all while calmly watching them eat, without any of them realizing what he's done. The direction of the book comes when Bart returns a wallet dropped by a woman named Sarah. She's modest, polite, organized, and compatible with everything he wants. When she later finds him at work and asks him to coffee, Bart begins wondering whether he has finally found his 100% match. The book is short, graphic, absurd, and extremely deadpan. Combines serial killer horror, dating satire, gross-out comedy, and the idea that a person can appear ordinary while hiding violence inside every compartment of his life. Woom by Duncan Ralston. Woom takes place almost entirely inside room 6 of the Lonely Motel, where a man calling himself Angel hires a sex worker named Shyla for the night. Angel makes one very special request when he calls the agency: send him the largest woman available. But when Shyla arrives, Angel does not ask for sex. Instead, he offers her extra money to answer personal questions and listen while he tells her a series of disturbing stories connected to people who previously stayed in room 6. As the night continues, Angel and Shyla begin using increasingly large sex toys, but Angel appears much more interested in telling his stories and watching how Shyla reacts to them. The first story follows a couple named Johnny and Ginny. Ginny has developed a serious heroin addiction and owes her dealer $6,000. To clear the debt, she and Johnny agree to smuggle nearly 100 small packets of heroin across the Canadian border. Because Ginny looks like an addict, Johnny has to carry most of them. He swallows packet after packet until his stomach begins cramping. When his body finally gives out, he has explosive diarrhea in the hotel bathroom and passes 27 packets into the toilet. He has to retrieve each packet by hand, wash them in the sink, and then he refuses to swallow them again. So, Ginny inserts all 27 packets into her vagina. But not long afterward, she begins convulsing. Some of the packets have ruptured inside her. Johnny desperately reaches into her body and removes them individually, attempting to get the drugs out before she overdoses. That story gives you a pretty good idea of what reading Woom feels like. It's gross, tragic, and constantly focused on bodies being used as containers for something. Angel and Shyla trade other stories involving an attempted abortion, a teenage girl's attachment to a mannequin, suffocation during sex, and a form of rebirthing therapy in which a person is wrapped tightly inside a rug while several people sit on top of him and force him to fight his way out. At first, the stories appear to be separate pieces of motel folklore. Shyla gradually notices that names, objects, and injuries keep returning. Somehow the stories are connected. However, Angel refuses to explain why he chose these particular stories or why he chose Shyla. The structure of this book is several disgusting stories slowly locking together until we learn what the book is really about. It's graphic and claustrophobic, and its recurring subjects include trauma, sex, consent, pregnancy, motherhood, rebirth, and the desire to go back in time and repair your life. The Summer I Died by Ryan C. Thomas. This is yet another one that I've already made a video on, so feel free to check that out in the description down below. The Summer I Died follows Roger Huntington, a college student who returns to New Hampshire for the summer and reconnects with his childhood best friend, Tooth. They have been friends since kindergarten, but their lives are beginning to move in different directions. Roger has gone away to college, while Tooth works at a warehouse and lives with his alcoholic father. The opening chapters follow the two of them spending time together. They shoot beer cans, steal alcohol, watch The Thing, argue about the future, and insult each other with the familiarity of people who have known one another for most of their lives. During Roger's first time firing a gun, He accidentally shoots a bee and leaves it fused to the side of a metal trash can. Tooth crushes it beneath his boot, arguing that a quick death is better than leaving it to suffer. That idea of suffering, and whether death can sometimes be preferable to prolonged pain, appears repeatedly throughout the rest of the novel. Later, Roger and Tooth hear a woman screaming somewhere in the woods. Roger thinks about every horror movie in which investigating a strange noise gets someone killed. Tooth attempts to call the police, but there is no signal. Roger says that they should leave, but Tooth says, "Movies aren't real. She is. We can't just leave her if she needs help." They follow the screams to an isolated cabin and are captured by a man Roger begins calling Skinny Man. They awake restrained inside a basement containing chains, a wood stove, dog bowls, tools, and a locked room. In one early act of torture, Skinny Man whips Tooth across the face with razor wire. He then forces the wire into Tooth's mouth and ties it around the back of his head. Part of Tooth's lower lip is sliced off and eaten by Skinny Man's dog. Meanwhile, any movement of Tooth's jaw cuts the corners of his mouth farther towards his cheeks. While being held captive, Roger attempts to retreat into memories and comic book fantasies, but Tooth keeps talking to him and tries to prevent him from mentally disappearing. He's constantly looking for a way out. The book is graphic, tense, cruel, and exhausting. It touches on friendship, heroism, suffering, luck, fate, and hopelessness. All right, now that we've covered all 10 books, let's go ahead and rank them. But before I start, let's quickly talk about what each tier means. At the top, we have S tier. This is for books that genuinely blew me away. They need to be impressively written, have something meaningful to say, and stay with me after I finish them. If a book lands in this tier, it's pretty clear that it's one of my favorites ever. A tier is for books I consider genuinely great. They're well written and meaningful, but they may not have affected me quite as deeply as the books in S tier. So they're great, but there is some division between S and A. It takes a lot to get into the S tier. B tier is going to be for the books that gave me one of the major things I look for, but not everything. Maybe the ideas of the book really spoke to me, but the writing was rough. Or maybe the writing of the book itself was impressive, but it just didn't connect with me emotionally. Maybe the book was enjoyable, but just a little bit shallow. A book in B tier is above average, and I would probably read it again, but not anything to write home about. C tier is average. This is for books that have good ideas and entertaining moments, but just don't completely come together. This is basically the airplane tier. If something is C tier, it means that I would read it if I had nothing better to do, but I probably would try and find something better. Now that might sound kind of harsh for books that I'm calling average, but the amazing thing about books is that there are so many S tier books, so many amazing books, more than any of us will ever have time to read, that it's really not worth wasting your time with an average book if you can find something better. Now we have the D tier. D tier is for books I think are terrible. I would rather raw dog a 4-hour flight and stare at the seat in front of me than ever read a D tier book. And finally, we have the poop tier. This is going to be reserved for the worst book on the list, so I'm not going to put anything here until the end. I'll have ranked every book, and then whatever I have in the D tier, I'll think about those a little bit. Whichever one is the worst, I'll move down into the poop tier. This is a book that I would not recommend for any reason, and that I actively found unpleasant to read. While ranking these, I'm mostly asking myself a few basic questions. Did I care about the characters? Did I enjoy reading the book? Did the violence reveal anything, or was it only there to be disgusting? And did the book give me anything to think about afterward? Did it change me? Did it teach me a lesson? Did it touch on some truth of the universe that I hadn't thought of before? Did it stick with me? But most importantly, I'm asking myself, did I enjoy it? With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. All right, first up, we have Woom. This one is going to be a tough one to rank. It's definitely not S tier, definitely not D tier. It's going to fall somewhere in between. I think the construction of this book is easily its greatest strength. The stories start off feeling random, but slowly we kind of learn with Shyla that everything is connected. And by the ending, you can look back and see that everything in this book had a clear purpose, and the author knew what they were doing from the beginning. And this one definitely deserves bonus points for the title. The main character has a speech impediment, so if he says something like room, going to come out like Woom. And you'll see when you read the book that the physical womb is actually very important to the plot of the book itself. The book feels very intentional. It's short. Nothing feels like it could have been cut. And this writer knows what he's doing. The prose is strong. I think my only complaint is that it just didn't. It's not even a complaint. It's more so it's missing something and I can't even say what it is. And I think that's what's funny about ranking books is sometimes it's so subjective that even you yourself don't know what was missing. The book is good, like I said. I didn't think that anything was gratuitous. I think the author had a clear purpose all the way through. I enjoyed reading it. I would read it again. I think this is a B tier book. It was above average, but it didn't blow me away. All right, next up we have The Slob. Won't lie, I'm a little bit disappointed to talk about this one this early in the list. In the summary, I said that The Slob touches on women being forced to clean up violence they did not create. But now that I get to make that a more nuanced take, I honestly think that that theme came about more as a convenient result of the violence that the author wanted to write. I don't think it was intentional, and it wasn't a carefully developed idea. Some of the physical violence is just inaccurate. I think it doesn't seem to have a great understanding of female anatomy. The book starts off relatively strong compared to what it becomes. It establishes Vera's relationship with cleaning and connects it to her childhood trauma, but then it seems more interested in inventing new ways to torture her than in exploring what any of it means. The violence felt completely gratuitous to me. It didn't make me understand Vera more. It didn't reveal anything new about the slob. It kind of just kept escalating until it felt ridiculous, and I stopped remembering that Vera was a real person. The book seemed more interested in staying with her pain than saying anything about the human condition or anything that I personally care about. What I'll say about The Slob is that it feels more focused on violence than revealing anything about the human condition or touching on anything that I personally care about. So for me, this one is a clear case D tier. The only question mark is going to be whether this is the worst book on this list. Does it deserve the poop tier or is it staying in D? Stay till the end of the video to find out. Fluids. So if you watch my video on fluids, you probably have a general idea of my thoughts on the book. It is one of the most technically flawed books that I still genuinely love. Won't lie, the writing is tough. There's typos, formatting errors, confusing perspective shifts, there's clunky sentences, and sections that could have been entirely cut from the book. I think there are a couple sections that get very abstract that I kind of wish would have been edited out or written in a more clear way. But the book just felt alive in a way that better written books don't. Lauren and Dahlia's relationship is chaotic, manipulative, intimate, funny, disgusting, and painful. Even when I disliked some of the writing, I had real emotional reactions to what was going on, and it touched on themes like the trans experience and gender dysphoria and loneliness, and showed me a perspective that I had never seen before in a way that served as a slap in the face and that I truly think turned me into a better and more empathetic person. It was so gross and violent and disgusting, but this is a book that earned every single disgusting scene. This one just felt urgent, like the author genuinely needed to get something out, and she found the best way to do it, even if the writing wasn't perfect. And let me be clear, this is her first book, and according to Goodreads, her ratings have gotten higher every single book, so I can only imagine that the book after this might have been even better. The book was meaningful, it spoke to me, even with some flaws. I think this is a little bit of a fight between B and A, but I'm going to go with B simply because of the fact that there are other books that spoke to me in similar ways, but had even better writing. Being said, I could easily see if this book had received one more editing pass, it climbing up to the A tier. And remember, B tier might sound harsh, that might sound like it's average. B is not average. B is a good book. C is where the average books are going, right? So this is a good book. I would read it again, and I would highly recommend it. All right, 100% match. I'm going to get it out of the way. I loved this book. Thought it was awesome. The main character, Bart, his voice completely carries. He's the way he describes dating, fast food, hygiene, murder, bodily waste, and the child inside his basement with the exact same emotion was just really funny to me. I read this book as more of a comedy than a horror, and it really borrows the shape of a classic romantic comedy. He has disappointing dates, he unexpectedly gets asked out, he worries about his clothing, has what he believes is a successful coffee date, and starts thinking he may have finally found the perfect partner, all while having, child chained in his basement or while he's dumping feces into chili. This book was super funny, but in terms of substance, I found it to fall a little bit flat. Once I understand Bart's voice and the central joke around 100% match, there wasn't much more beneath it. Most of the characters are thin and the humor operates in the same way all the way throughout, but I enjoyed myself too much to care. It's kind of like Harry Potter, it could not be more different from Harry Potter, but in terms of reading experience, I actually found it to be similar in the sense that once you recognize the pattern, you know what's going to happen for the rest of the book. It's like a comfort book, which is a weird thing to say about a Patrick C. Harrison novel. But not every book needs to completely change how I view the world. Sometimes a book can just have one great idea, execute it well, make me laugh, and end before the joke becomes completely exhausting. So I would say that 100% Match is effectively the opposite of Fluids. While Fluids was an extremely emotionally strong book, there weren't many moments of light enjoyment. It's a book that I would read when I'm being very serious about life and I want something that's going to change me. 100% Match is the book that I'm going to read when I'm bored and maybe I had a bad day and I need something that's going to lighten the mood. It's written well, but it didn't say anything super important to me. So I think this is about the definition of B tier. Oh my God, we have Exquisite Corpse. If you've heard me talk about this book, which I've mentioned plenty of times, you probably already know where this one's going to go. This was the first extreme horror novel I ever read, so maybe there's some nostalgia at play, but this book is the reason I continued exploring the extreme horror genre after encountering so many books that I didn't like. The prose is incredible, some of the best I've ever read in general, not just within extreme horror. The book has this poetic prose, and Poppy Z. Brite has this way of describing things that are completely horrific and somehow still making the sentences themselves beautiful. What really separates the book is that the violence never feels empty. It belongs to the characters in the world, and Poppy Z. Brite has something to say. Andrew and Jay's obsession with consuming and preserving people feels like an extension of their need to possess them completely. And then this touching on the AIDS epidemic. Luke's experience with AIDS gives the book a completely different relationship with the body, one where control is impossible. And Tran is there kind of in the middle of these desires, but he still feels like a person with his own life, family, and relationships. The book is disturbing, but it's also deeply sad. Loneliness, addiction, illness, prejudice, grief, and people trying to connect while surrounded by death. Me, in this book, the quieter scenes are just as memorable and disturbing as the murders. It just never felt gratuitous. It was beautiful writing, memorable characters, strong sense of place. I mean, the setting was amazing. Like, New Orleans has never been written so beautiful and violent. This one stayed with me for so long after I finished it. And even outside of the themes and the emotional components, just the excitement of watching someone escape from prison, the pacing is just so strong. I am almost at a lack of words for how to explain this book without giving too much away. All I can say is that it's one of my favorite books ever, extreme horror or otherwise. I highly recommend that you go read it if you haven't already. This is something that feels like great literature that happened to be extreme horror, rather than an extreme horror novel that wanted to be great literature. So without a doubt, Exquisite Corpse is going in S tier. It was never a question. I knew before I even started making this video this was going in S tier. Seriously, I think you should read this if you haven't. I think you will love it. Ender is the Flesh, dude. I can't believe that this is coming up right after Exquisite Corpse. think for starters, this might be the most complete novel on the list. The writing is strong, while not as beautiful as Exquisite Corpse. It doesn't need to be for a book like this. The world building is great. I understand this kind of cattle system that they have going on with humans. I understand all these different characters. And the idea feels very controlled from beginning to end. It really sold the idea of humans being bred as a product. It felt so like this could actually happen, which is terrifying. I mean, the professional language, paperwork, regulations, inspections, like how everything was just an ordinary business. And Marcos was just one of the most interesting characters I've ever read. He recognizes exactly what's wrong with the system. He understands all of the euphemisms and lies. He refuses to eat meat and looks down at all the people around him. But at the same time, he is one of the main people keeping this system running. This book makes you think about those moral masturbators who get off on the idea that they're better than everyone else, but they don't actually do anything. Marcos thinks he's a good person because he's aware of the cruelty, but he doesn't actually do anything to make it change. He just continues to benefit from it. I love how the novel handled that hypocrisy. This book just gave me so much to think about. All the things wrong with the world. It makes me feel like I should be a vegetarian. But then I'm like, oh, meat is good. And then I start thinking, am I just like Marcos? But not even just meat, right? Not even just the meat industry. Going outside of that, what are all the things that we recognize as wrong with the world that we continue to contribute to? Gee, this is just a book that stuck with me for so long. Normally I finish a book and I forget a lot about the plot. But with this book, I mean, I reread it probably once a year, but even the first time I read it, it stuck with me for so long, which is why I keep returning to it every year. So Tender is the Flesh is without a doubt going into S tier, right next to Exquisite Corpse. It's beautiful. The Summer I Died. Man, why do we have 3 bangers back to back to back? This might be the book that I had the most fun reading. Roger and Tooth's relationship carried it for me. Their friendship feels natural, funny. Like I said in my full-length video on this book, I would have read an entire novel about them just hanging out. Reading this book, I really began to care about their jokes, plans, family problems, and the future they imagined together. When the violence began, when Skinny Man started hurting them, it felt like something was being taken away from me. And it honestly felt like, this might be a weird thing to say if you're not a writer yourself, it felt like it was hard for the author to write. It felt like the writer themselves did not want Roger and Tooth to go through all this pain, but it had to happen anyway. The book made me think about the difference between performative masculinity, what it means to really be a hero. The book made me think hard about what it means to be a hero, a good person, versus performative masculinity. That being said, it's not quite on the level of Exquisite Corpse and Tender is the Flesh. I know if you watched my recent video, I called it the best extreme horror book I've ever read. It might be the one I had the most fun reading, but it hasn't quite stuck with me in the same way that Exquisite Corpse and Tender is the Flesh have. There is a message here. It did impress me. The writing was good, though not as good as Exquisite Corpse, but it is missing something that Tender is the Flesh and Exquisite Corpse have. And by that, I mean, it didn't shock me. It didn't change who I am. But it was very enjoyable, and it did make me think about the world in a slightly different way. So this is a clear case of A tier. Grandpappy. If you watch my book on Grandpappy, you already know that I hate this book. The best way I can explain it is that it made me feel nothing. I did not care about what I was reading. Charles was not an interesting character. None of the scenes mattered. They were disgusting, but I didn't care that they were disgusting. I wasn't disturbed by anything. I was just a little disgusted by some of the scenes. The book occasionally did try to touch on things like family trauma, abuse, neglect, aging, and this complicated relationship of caring for an older family member who hurt your family. But none of those ideas really resonated with me. It kind of felt tacked on to what the author really wanted to do, which was disturb people. The book just felt like a compilation of dirty scenes. The writing itself was also rough. There was distracting errors, awkward dialogue, unclear descriptions. There are many scenes and memories that felt invented at the moment the story needed another surprise. They didn't seem to come around organically. This is one that could be in contention for poop tier. So I'm going to put it in D alongside the Slob. Cows. So Cows is actually written pretty well. I heard a lot of bad things about this book going in. I did think the writing was pretty strong, but it also failed for me in a lot of ways. I feel like the book really was trying to talk about themes like masculinity, abuse, consumption, loneliness, and the way that victims can go on to reproduce that pain onto others. But it kind of felt like whenever the book got close to saying something powerful, it would just bury that moment between feces, sexual violence, human cow sex, mutilation, cannibalism, or just other exaggerated displays of brutality. Like the author just didn't know when to stop. Eventually, it didn't feel like the violence was supporting the themes, but overshadowing them. I also thought the violence was just very romanticized. I understand Stephen's sense of power is ultimately destructive and that he's reproducing the abuse that shaped him, but the novel spends so much time inside the freedom and the transformation that it kind of feels like it's not a criticism of violence. The plus side of this book is that I can tell you what themes it's brushed up against. The issue is that the themes didn't feel that important. I am stuck between C and D for this one. But for me, the question then becomes, did I enjoy reading the book? And the answer is ultimately yes, despite some complaints. So I'm going to drop it in C tier because it is undoubtedly better than The Slob and Grandpappy. Playground. Where do you guys think this one is going to rank? Because honestly, I don't even know yet. There were things I enjoyed about it. The premise is immediately entertaining, and honestly, writing the summary for the book a while after I've read it was very interesting because as I was writing the summary, I was like, man, this book is awesome. This book sounds awesome if you're just reading the summary. I mean, deadly playgrounds are a strong concept, and as I was reading the book, was super curious to see what each new piece of equipment would do. Very similar to how I was when I watched the, second and third Saw movies. There seems to actually be a reason for the novel beginning. This theme of children having to pay for the way that their parents taught them is actually a very interesting idea that I don't think is explored quite enough in extreme horror. However, almost everything in this book felt exaggerated. There's one specific scene, it's like page 40 something, where someone, I won't say who, is doing some stuff with some feces, right? And it felt completely pointless. Maybe someone could point out why it was there, but I hated that scene. It just didn't feel like it mattered. It felt like the author thought of that scene and was like, yeah, let's throw it in there, but didn't know why they were doing it. Geraldine is also just so cartoonishly evil that I never found her frightening. Most of the children, despite being given backstories, feel like character types rather than believable kids. There's not really any suspense or tension between the traps. It really just becomes who's going to get hurt this time and how are they going to get hurt. The book wants us to be disturbed by Geraldine turning children's pain into entertainment, but the book is also presenting that pain as entertainment. Like I said, I could see these ideas about parental pressure, childhood abuse, competition, and selfishness. It just never felt like those ideas mattered more than the next trap, which is similar to how I felt about Cows. Still, it was readable, it had a clear plot, I understood what each character wanted, and I was interested enough to finish it. It did pretty much what I would expect from an airplane book, even if I would probably hide the cover from the person sitting next to me. So you can probably guess, I'm going to drop this into C tier, right next to Cows. All right, now that we've ranked all 10 books, time to answer the question. Which book is worse, The Slob or Grandpappy? Which one wins the honor of going in the poop tier? And if you love these books, no shame to you. This is so subjective. We all look for different things in the books that we read. But if you're on the same page as me, I want you to comment down below, which book do you think deserves the poop tier? I think, and it's tough because I really didn't like either of these books, they are similar writing levels. The quality is very similar. If anything, I would give a slight edge to The Slob because Grandpappy, just the writing is terrible. Sentences are clunky, there's typos. However, think one of these books is worse than the other. They're both gratuitous, but one seems to be taking advantage while the other seems to just be having some harmless fun. So I would say that the Slob belongs in the poop tier. It was physically hard to read, and not for the way that Aron Beauregard intended. Book was boring, disgusting, and it was not about anything except for violence. It could have been. It had potential, but it just wasn't. It just wanted us to watch this lady be hurt over and over. I didn't enjoy it. Poop tier, there we go. All right, now that the list is finalized, let's take a look at what we got. In S tier, we have Tender is the Flesh and Exquisite Corpse. These were the two books that gave me everything I wanted. Excellent writing, memorable characters, meaningful ideas, and violence that strengthened the story rather than overwhelmed it. It's books that I have read multiple times, books that have stuck with me over the years, books that I don't think I'll ever forget. They're books that I would recommend to anyone, as long as I think they had the stomach for them. In A tier, we have The Summer I Died. It may not be as technically impressive as Exquisite Corpse or Tender is the Flesh, but it was incredibly readable and made me care deeply about Roger and Tooth. The pacing was strong, and I just fell into this book, loved it, and could not stop reading. In B tier, we have Fluids, 100% Match, and Woom. Fluids was meaningful, but technically messy. 100% Match was light on substance, but extremely entertaining. Woom was carefully constructed, although I thought the structure was stronger than the characters. All great reads though, all books that I would recommend and potentially read again. In C tier, we have Playground and Cows. Both had awesome ideas, but both of the books became so fascinated with their own violence that those ideas got buried. In D tier, we have Grandpappy. It was badly written, random, and emotionally empty. And in the poop tier, we have The Slob, which was probably the most unpleasant book I've ever read, and one that I don't recommend you sit through yourself. Looking at everything together, I think the difference between the books I loved and the books that I hated had nothing to do with how graphic they were. It was whether the violence revealed something or buried it. I mean, look at The Slob. It had potential to do a lot of great things, but it all just got lost behind the horror. I say you can show me anything. Exquisite Corpse has some of the grossest scenes I've ever read, some of the most violent. But when the book ended, I understood why I read it. That's what I'll say. You can show me anything you want as a writer, but I need to understand why I was shown it. But I'm curious, how would you guys rank these books? Did I get anything completely wrong? If I did, that's okay. Like I said, if someone loved The Slob and connected with it, I'm happy to accept our differences. We all look for different things. We all come away from books feeling drastically different. And so much can be affected by the mindset you were in when you read a book. So by no means am I saying any of these authors suck, right? But yeah, leave a comment. Let me know, how would you have ranked these? And what's your favorite extreme horror book in general? Thank you guys so much for sticking around until the end of the video. This is a little bit different from what I usually do, but let me know if you enjoyed it. Please be sure to subscribe if you did. Videos will continue to come out every single Sunday, so subscribe, hit that little notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.